Good evening, my local drones. This is Bio Gundam here, and I'm back again for another video. So today, I'm going to be reviewing the manga of Elfen, our rather famous or infamous series for its tragic story, themes, and ultra violence and gore. Sounds like an OVA series from the 80s if you fucking ask me. So my first impressions of the series were, so we've got this mutant race of humans coming into existence, and humans are trying to kill them. You know, sounds interesting enough. What could possibly go wrong? The story of Elfen is about a race of mutated humans called the Diclonius that instinctively kill humans and who are captured by the government and placed in a top secret base to be experimented on. The main focus is an escapee Diclonius named Lucy, who gets shot in the head, causing her to have amnesia and a split personality called New, who washes up on the shore where she's found and taken in by our primary protagonist Kota together with his cousin. Elfen is trying to be the social political drama about the Diclonius who are discriminated against by humans and are usually killed on sight. It does this by asking questions like, can humans and Diclonius coexist? And are Diclonius born to kill humans, or is it because of humans' treatment of them that they are the way they are? On paper, this idea sounds like a really interesting, if a bit tired idea, but the problem is that the presentation and execution of this concept are very poor and lackluster, to say the least. This holds especially true because the ending doesn't even begin to answer the questions that are set up, or any hint of an answer is told very vaguely. The only positive I have to say about the ending is they lean a bit more into like the star-crossed lovers aspect of Kota and Lucy's relationship, which I felt was one of the better elements in the series overall, but I digress. The story itself suffers from the biggest case of tonal whiplash I have seen in quite a while. This is because even though the series is trying to be a dark and serious with social political themes of society's moral hypocrisy and alienation of outgroups, it doesn't really work when it relies on so much cheap, emotionally manipulative shock factor instead of something of actual substance. An example of this is a scene where a group of psychotic little kids beat a puppy to death while grinning from ear to ear. Besides that, you've got at least one fan service scene in almost every chapter, some examples of which being the time Lucy New needs help getting dressed, the time the main character's cousin wants to bang him, and the time Lucy New gropes and makes out with people just cuz. To top it all off, the plot becomes silly in how dark and serious it's trying to be, with the execution of its themes, all of which basically boil down to humanity does fucked up things. Now, to be clear, I don't mind when a manga takes a more naturalistic approach to their storytelling, because the idea of another human species trying to take over and become the dominant species of human isn't that edgy of a concept if you think about all the many types of prehistoric humanity that are around during the caveman times, or more recent examples if you take a look at the Bronze Age, where there are many examples of groups of people, tribes, or even entire civilizations coming into conflict and wiping each other out. Of course, these were processes that took hundreds to thousands of years in some case, and it was never a guarantee that one of those groups was going to survive. However, the problem with Elfen though is that not only can it pick an appropriate tone, both overall and in the individual scenes, but also as it goes so unnecessarily over the top that it ends up coming across as cartoony and falling flat on its face. The storyline itself is a whole other beast, which I'll talk about now. I don't mind the slice of life moments as they allow for some levity, but also give you time to get to care about the characters and actually feel bad for them when shit hits the fan. I find it jarring though that it turns into a harem because as the story progresses, Kota picks up a new lolly or a new Diclonius to live with him because insert tragic reason here. Also, there are some narrative choices that are so ridiculous that I almost cry tears of laughter when reading them because of how over the top they are. For example, when Lucy kills Kota's father and sister, that was basically kickstarted by a misunderstanding because his cousin was getting a little too close to him. She decides she also likes Kota too and goes yandere on his ass. I find the entire series of events funny as hell, and to add to my comedy, it turns around and frames it as tragic, but in my mind it's just forced melodrama. This series' tendency to force drama is only escalated when it turns out that Kota and Lucy conveniently meet again years later around the same time period when Lucy escapes and Kota comes to live in the town where he and Lucy met and played together as children. It's there that Kota conveniently doesn't remember what happened in his past, and Lucy conveniently exhibits the cognitive ability of a 4-year-old. Did the planets just align for this one moment, or is Kota just a lolly magnet? I can probably name a few more examples of in-series off-screen godly intervention for the sake of drama, but I digress. In all honesty though, if this were to happen in real life, it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. You know, the inhuman experiments, the double moral standards, and the psychopaths in power, all of these are visible a mile away, yet the story showcases them like this is some new concept that hasn't been explored before, even though it has been, and in my opinion, much better elsewhere. What kills the series for me is that it has all the elements for an actual tragedy in the classical sense. You know, it has star-crossed lovers with Kota, Lucy, and New. You've got this revenge and maybe forgiveness aspect with Kota's father and sister. You have this hubris aspect of, you know, does humanity have the right to interfere with what Mother Nature or evolution intends? Because the series is so overbearing with its unfortunate events that it's hard for me to take it seriously as it unfolds as a character of what it's supposed to be. Now, when it comes to characters, our lead protagonist Coda is pretty much bland as toast due to how passive he is. Even though personality-wise he's a good, if not conflicted guy, he just isn't used to his full effect. This is rather bothersome as he has major roles to play in the story. Try to add more depth to him by giving him some history of Lucy before the start of the main story, adding a good amount of conflicts stemming from that later on in the story. At the end of the day, though, it doesn't really amount to much in the grand scheme of things. It flip-flops between I hate you and I love you way too much, making it feel cheap, and I stopped caring after the first so many times. Fortunately, to balance out Kota's blandness, we have our secondary protagonist, Lucy/New, who is a little better written and offering a far greater level of intrigue than Kota, besides the whole split personality thing. The thing that I find to be the most interesting about her is that her inner conflict, as on the one hand she hates humanity and has an instinctual instinct to kill all humans, but on the other hand there's a part of her that just wants to live a peaceful life with Kota and extras, despite her guilt towards them. This duality that's presented in her character is much more interesting than the one-dimensional sadistic attitude of kill all humans, because humans are bad, McKay. The side characters are just as bland and lacking in both depth and character development as the lead. The only characters that actually stood out for having something more to them were Nana and Dr. Kurama. Nana because she's one of the few Dicloniuses that's actually kept alive for experiments and has been stuck in a lab for most of her entire life, yet she doesn't have any hostility towards humans besides for self-defense. Even in those cases though, humans are generally still alive after the encounter, as she actively chooses to spare them despite the fact that Dicloniuses are supposed to instinctively want to kill humans. Relative to Nana though is Dr. Kurama, an entirely different breed of interesting. On the outside he seems like a very cold and cruel man to humans and Diclonius alike. Despite this though, he has this very odd father-daughter relationship with Nana, even though his real biological daughter is another Diclonius that's kept at the base. The main appeal of his character is the dual nature, where on the other hand he'll kill both humans and Diclonius without a second thought, but on the other hand he will express clear feelings of affection, parental, not romantic, towards Nana. This is exemplified when Nana was badly injured and was going to get put down for failing her mission, but he went out of his way to fix her up and even gave her massive amounts of money to help her start a new life. His backstory is also pretty well done, as it is presented with this very interesting moral dilemma, where he happened to find out that his baby daughter was a Diclonius. The result of this revelation, of course, was that he received an order from his superiors to kill his daughter, which made him heavily conflicted. On the one hand, his child would most likely be a threat to humanity one day, but on the other hand, it was his baby daughter who hadn't harmed anyone. So to make a long story short, he tried to go through with it, but in the process his wife saw him and killed herself. But then his daughter ended up in the lab on the base where he works, and he is forced to live with the guilt of his actions. On another note, the villains in the story are very cartoonishly evil, as they just do their thing because they can. They are just evil for the sake of being evil and are used as a poor excuse to hammer in the message that humans do fucked up things. This is like Saturday morning cartoons levels of moral message. Imagine instead of the Care Bear saying sharing is caring, they say, now remember children, the human race does fucked up things. So when it comes to the art of the series, where do I begin with this? Because this is like judging a live train wreck. The artwork is really ugly and the backgrounds look really shitty. As for the art style, it has this cartoonish kind of Moe aesthetic that doesn't really fit with the dark tone the series is trying to go for. The character designs are probably some of the ugliest things I've had to look at, especially when it comes to the characters' eyes. They're drawn huge, even by manga standards, and look like they came from the anime for Clannad, except without QAnnie's standard high attention to detail. The only good attention to detail was some of the gore, like seeing finger bones or organs. It reminds me of the good old 80s and 90s series where we had hyper-violence and rivers of blood. Now, when it comes to enjoyment, I know I've been somewhat negative about Elfen Lied, even throughout this review, but there are a few parts I liked. I liked the gory fights where people get ripped apart. Some of the detail that went into the actual gore, I was kind of impressed. Even some of the fan service, jarring as it was. And I found the whole Kota, Lucy, New dynamic, I found cute in the more laid-back moments of the series. Very, very wholesome stuff. So overall, in conclusion, Elfen Lied is a clusterfuck of ideas that by themselves are good, but which are badly implemented by an incompetent writer who doesn't know how to use them to their full effect, and instead substitutes proper writing for cheap drama and shallow thematic development to get a rise out of people. That is Elfen Lied's biggest trap and its main tactic that it uses to get you to care and invest emotions into its narrative, that even I myself fell into this. Once you get off the emotional roller coaster though and regain use of your brain, you see it for what it is. If you're looking for a gore fest, then Elfen Lied is the manga for you. However, if you're not looking for a gore fest, then you'll be unimpressed by its poorly written characters and generally lazy writing. On the bright side, if you like this concept and wish for it, or execute better, then I highly recommend you read Parasite or Aijin, or even Tokyo Ghoul, if you've really exhausted all other options, and feel you can't live anymore. That is the end of my review. Special thanks to my script editor Lone Crit for his continued support in my franchise. This is Bio Gundam, signing out.